be nervous? It's a fight. It's a 7-point ball game, and we get the ball first. It's a fight. Go out there and fight.
Gives it to Love, running left, tripped up, stays on his feet through one tackle, muscling and strong.
Oh, he scored!
He's in!
Oh my gosh!
Touchdown, Notre Dame! Jeremiah Love would not be denied. Aller throws, loose ball, intercepted! Christian Gray picks it up. Notre Dame will get the ball back.
Irish Nation, Notre Dame abolishes Syracuse 70-7. We reached garbage time about 2 minutes into the second quarter. Syracuse never had a meaningful snap after the first quarter that was not in garbage time. Mike, some of the most insane stats you will ever see in a senior day. I'm going to let you have the first word diving into this game. I hope we spend less than 10 minutes on this, but we're going to cover Syracuse. We're going to look at the latest and greatest thoughts on the college football rankings after last week's big announcement with Notre Dame at number 9. And then we'll close out today's show previewing, the season finale out in Palo Alto against the Stanford Cardinal. Mike, so many insane stats in this game. Give me your favorite. What do you got for our listeners of just the most insane game I think I've maybe ever seen?
First off, I want to start with you saying that we abolished them. I don't know if that was your intent, but it came across as we beat them so bad we basically we freed them. That's how bad it was a spiritual cleansing. That's how bad it was.
Demolished. I think I left that at D-Day. Demolished.
No, they're gonna rise from the ashes. Basically, we spiritually cleanse them. But no, look. I mean, I think that is not far off. 70-7. I was telling Brett.
Hang on. I gotta state it. Abolish means put an end to something. I didn't say emancipate. We didn't emancipate.
Okay,
Syracuse.
You're right.
You abolish slavery. You emancipate.
Put an end. Okay. All right.
I stand by abolish. We put an end to Syracuse football. They are never coming back, and there was no emancipation in this game.
I will say I don't think that you intended to say abolish though. So
I did not. I meant to say demolish.
Yeah. I don't think either of us are looking too great here, right? I think our English teachers are. Hopefully they.
I would give large shots if we forget the English language.
I think we need to write an essay. That should be the punishment. We have to write an essay to see if our grammar is still intact. But yeah, getting back to the game, just a thorough demolishment. 70-7. I was telling Brett before we recorded, for this game I was going to the Notre Dame bar in Santa Monica in Los Angeles.
Sorry, I gotta keep this going. Demolition.
What did I say?
Demolishment. You said demolishment.
Okay.
That's not a word.
Demolition? Yeah, okay. All right.
Demolition?
Demolition. All right. This is bad. All right. We're not.
This is our worst take ever. Mike, go ahead. How did you watch the game?
We've been out of college for a while, so we'll just say that. Back to the bar. Sonny McLean's in Santa Monica, Los Angeles. I assume that they would kick off like 10 minutes after the broadcast start, which is usually what happens. I was also just running late. I show up to the bar and it kicked off on time, of course, like, the one time. Walk into the bar, we're already up 21-0. Just shocking. Just no 3 touchdowns before the offense even touched the ball. And then within 2 snaps, we have a Jeremiah Love house call. So just about as great as a start as you possibly could have. We nearly doubled their yards, and most of their yards came on just a garbage time drive where they scored. We'll get into the advanced stats more in a bit, but just very, very lopsided. Just any way you want to slice it. This is one of the biggest demolitions that I've seen of a fan in any sport. Honestly, it really felt like we were playing a JV team. It felt like we were playing like a weak FCS team. And look, Syracuse is they're not a good football team, but they are a Power 4 football team that that has scholarship athletes. And to be able to make them look as outclassed as we did, I think that's that is a testament to the talent on our team, and also the fact that we are still taking all of our opponents seriously. Even if it's a game that's maybe not hyped up like some of our other games have been this year.
Yeah, I don't know which of the following three is the most absurd statistic, but we scored 21 points before our offense went onto the field. We were up 42-0 4 seconds into the second quarter. And according to collegefootballdata.com, our defense, and keep in mind they exclude garbage time, and garbage time started, again, 4 seconds into the second quarter. If you're up by 42 points in the second quarter, that is when garbage time begins. So in the first quarter and the first 4 seconds of the second quarter, our defensive havoc rate will go down in history as 100% in this game. Every single play by our defense had some form of havoc. Tackles for loss, pass deflections, interceptions, punt blocks, like you name it. Our defense was just absolutely destroying them for what the advanced stats will go down in history saying the entire football game that was a meaningful snap played in this game. So an absolute outrageous performance in a positive way for Notre Dame. Mike, what players should we call out? There are so many. Let's start on defense. Who do you got as the biggest guys here to give a shout out to?
Before I give a shout out, I just quickly Googled demolishment just to make sure I covered my bases, and then we'll leave it at that. It says it is a less common, archaic form of demolitions. Technically a word. Okay. So if we're playing Scrabble, I'm good.
Okay.
All right. Getting back to the defense. Look, I think I want to call it Jalen Stroman, because Jalen Stroman, Jalen, I'm sorry that I'm calling you out while we're still having this whole bit on demolishment. But Jalen had an incredible game. He's someone who was a key transfer portal addition in the offseason. Brett and I, we talked about this coming into the season. He was someone that we thought would be at least like a key part of the rotation in the secondary. But what ended up happening is Tay Johnson really, really emerged and has become an impact player. Well, Tay Johnson was hurt this game, hurt his hand. It looks like he should be good to go for Stanford, although I would say Freeman wasn't 100% certain with it. I think it's very possible that we hold Tay Johnson out another week and just make sure he's good to go for knock on wood the playoffs. But Jalen Stroman, someone who had seen his snap count probably not be where he wanted to be when he transferred to Notre Dame. Johnson was out this game, and Stroman really, really made the most of his moment. He had a pick six, and then he had a very notable punt block. So start of the game, very impactful player. You just love to see it, because I think this is what the culture of Marcus Freeman's program is. It's guys not getting beat down if things aren't necessarily going their way, being there for their teammates, continuing to work behind the scenes, even if your number is not being called at that moment. And because you put all that work in, and because you're prepared, when your moment does arrive, you're ready and you make the most of it. And so I think Jalen Stroman is on defense is the person I want to call out here the most, because I think it's one, he had a stellar performance, and then two, everything that he did culminating in this game is just the embodiment of what Marcus Freeman strives to establish in all of his players from a cultural standpoint.
I think it's worth calling out. So totally agree, by the way, that Jason Onye, another guy who missed a lot of time last year, stepped away for personal and mental health reasons, and has just come back with Gabe Rubio injured, with Donovan Heinisch banged up. He has been an absolute force on the inside. 4 big tackles in this game, 3 stuffs in the run game. Thought he was all over the place. Kingston Viliamu unfortunately torn ACL out for the year. We'll come back to injuries in a second. But I thought, what a great game for him to close out just a phenomenal sophomore season. Devastating to see the sophomore go down, was just playing phenomenal football. Phenomenal tackler, 4 sacks on the year, generating a lot of pressures, so fast and instinctive in pass coverage. Big shout out to him. Leonard Moore, first career touchdown. Think that pick six deserves a shout out. Just I could pick guy after guy after guy on this team. Ethan Long, believe he's a true freshman, has not really played meaningful snaps at all. Gets a Pro Football Focus grade of 98 in this game, coming up with 2 stops in the run game and an interception. Talich again with the punt return. He's just kind of Mr. always in the right place at the right time. Lot of great performers on the defensive side of the ball. Mike, on offense, I mean, the advanced stats here again speak to itself. A 67% success rate again in that first quarter, in the first part of the second quarter. Explosiveness left and right. You have Jeremiah Love with a 45-yard touchdown, Jadarian Price with a 58-yard touchdown, Jeremiah Love with a 68-yard touchdown, and Ice Williams with a 30-yard touchdown. And lastly, it gets exhausting to say, is Kenny Minchie with a 25-yard touchdown, just explosive touchdown after touchdown after touchdown by the offense. Who are the individual contributors that stood out the most on the other side of the ball?
It's definitely Jeremiah Love first and foremost. I think he was a bit of a dark horse candidate for the Heisman coming into this game, and he put together such an impressive stat line. 8 carries, 171 yards. That's 21.4 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. You mentioned some of his big runs that he had. It was literally, as I mentioned at the start of the game, it was the second offensive snap. He just took it to the house. So look, it was just such a dominant performance that now he is, I think it is very likely that he is at least in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, notwithstanding some sort of abysmal performance against Stanford. Just again, another week where we have a number of highlight reel type plays from him, more eye-popping stats. I think it's when people looked at his stats at a quick glance, they would see the 171 yards and the first reaction was like, oh, that's pretty good. Oh, but it's Stanford. But then when they saw the number of carries, they're like, wait a minute. That is a crazy level of productivity for such few carries. So look, we're very blessed to watch this guy week in, week out. This guy is definitely going to go down as clearly one of the top running backs of all time at Notre Dame. I mean, look, he might have a case if he wins the Heisman. He would certainly have a case for maybe being the best running back in history at Notre Dame. Honestly, which given our long illustrious history, obviously that's extremely impressive. This is a guy who's going to be a very early pick in the NFL draft. So, and he continues to show that week in, week out. And look, Jadarian Price, his sidekick, so to speak, he had 70 yards as well on just 4 carries. So he was extremely effective too, had a touchdown. So look, it's just this running game is very, very elite, and it's led by these 2 backs. Jadarian Price is someone who's likely to go in the first round as well. So very scary proposition for opposing defenses. I would have liked to have seen CJ Carr, just get some more reps in, but we didn't even need to do that. It's just the defense and the run game were just so dominant. Carr only attempted 9 passes. So it was effectively, he effectively just got a handful of reps in and didn't really have to do anything aside from that.
I went back to our offense preview show all the way back in August that looked at Jeremiah Love versus Ashton Jeanty, Bryce Love, Derrick Henry, and Christian McCaffrey, the last 4 running backs to be Heisman Trophy finalists, to look at what do they have in common. And the only one that averaged more than 7 yards per carry was Bryce Love. With this game, Jeremiah Love is now averaging 7.1 yards per carry. That is more than Ashton Jeanty last year at 6.9. That is more than Derrick Henry at around 5.5 when Derrick Henry won the Heisman. Now, the difference is that Jeanty and Henry both had over 350 carries. And right now, with 1 game to go, Jeremiah Love has 185. And so he is getting half as many touches as those guys. So they had over 25 touchdowns. Jeanty had over 2,500 yards rushing. Henry had over 2,200 yards rushing. Whereas Jeremiah Love right now is at 1,300 yards and 17 touchdowns. So it just depends. Like if you break down the advanced stats and what he's doing in the big home run plays the yards per attempt, he's right there with them, pound for pound, yard for yard, play for play. I just still maintain you don't look and be like, oh my gosh, a running back had 28 touchdowns. Like, what are we talking about? There are a lot of running backs in history that have 17 touchdowns, or if you get a couple more, 18, 19, 20 touchdowns in a season. I think the limited number of touches, splitting that time with Jadarian Price and having a guy like CJ Carr throwing the football a lot, I think might hold back Jeremiah Love. But he has certainly now put up a campaign that has locked in a ticket to New York as a finalist. And we'll see. Like, if Julian Sayin and Mendoza struggle down the stretch, this is not a strong quarterback year. That was always going to need to be the case for Love to win the Heisman, of just not have a breakout quarterback around him, and that's what's going on right now.
Yeah, worth noting that he is I believe it was Caesar's Sportsbook. They had him as the second best odds to win the Heisman right now. But
Mendoza,
Mendoza, there is a pretty big gap between him and Mendoza. So Mendoza is definitely the runaway. But if you're, as you were alluding to right there, Brett, if you're just even in that conversation, look, there's a lot that can happen. If Mendoza and Sayin play poorly in the Big Ten championship, for instance, look, then there is possible that things could shake Jeremiah Love's way. But we'll see. It's not something I would bet on, but it's something that is possible. And again, it would just be a win to even just make it to the ceremony in New York.
So the last thing to cover is the injury bug. I would say, by all accounts, Notre Dame, as far as college football goes, has had a pretty darn healthy season. And our best players, CJ Carr, Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Leonard Moore, have stayed healthy. And really, from the start of the year till right now, there's only, by my count, 5 opening day contributors that will not be with us for the first playoff game, or at least there's a question mark. So the good news in the injury front, Tay Johnson and Gabe Rubio, both expected back by the playoff. We may be cautious here against Stanford. Jaden Greathouse at wide receiver, our WR1 coming into the year, has been cleared to play. But interestingly, as a junior, they're going to preserve a red shirt. He's only played in 4 games this year before getting hurt. He's been cleared the last 2 or 3. Freeman has clarified, yep, he could go, but we're going to save him for the playoff. So could Jaden Greathouse have another resurgence here in the college football playoff? I don't know. Like, I think he's going to have a hard time taking snaps from Faison, Pauling, and Malachi Fields, but he was pretty darn plug and play last year. He's obviously a great talent. So great news, Jaden Greathouse is coming back. And then the 2 that remain TBDs, Billy Schrauth and Charles Jagasaw, have not been ruled out for the year. Both on the offensive line. Both have a shot at being available in the college football playoff. Billy Schrauth, of course, played half the year. Charles Jagasaw hasn't played at all with the forearm fracture in the offseason ATV accident. And then the really tough loss here with Kingston Viliamu Asa out for the year, torn ACL, joining Ashton Cragg on the injured reserve. Mike, I got a question for you. If you can pick one guy back who has not really been a contributor this year, Jaden Greathouse, Billy Schrauth, Charles Jagasaw, who do you want playing in the first round of the college football playoff?
Assuming they're plug and play, there's not going to be any sort of issue where you're feeling out the chemistry. Jagasaw for sure. Jagasaw is our best offensive lineman. We were talking preseason. Well, we were talking before he had this injury, and actually when we still thought he might come back in October, obviously that hasn't happened. We were talking about him as potentially the next great Notre Dame offensive lineman, someone who could be a first round pick. So I think he's the clear person to pick to answer your question. And it's possible. Look, I would say that Mum has been the word on Jagasaw as of late. I don't really know where he is in terms of his recovery process. It's obviously been dragging. Initially it was October, and then he had another procedure to clean up something related to the surgery he got, I believe. And so that's extended his timeline. Freeman has not ruled him out for the year. So it's possible we could see some sort of scenario like we did last year in the playoff where as we make a stretch. If we make a stretch run in the playoff, or maybe even the first round, maybe he is good to go. But then you do have a question of is he is he into playing shape? Is he conditioned? Is he in a position where he could actually jump in and be effective? So we'll see. I mean, the good thing with Jagasaw is that he has actually shown that you can just throw him in and he can be effective. I mean, that's exactly what happened last year. So going on a little bit of a, going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but Jagasaw, I think, is clearly the answer here.
It's interesting. I was going to factor in the rust and the chemistry on the offensive line. And for me, then the obvious answer was Billy Schrauth, who was our highest graded offensive lineman before going down to the injury. But he's played 7 games this year. I think that's easier to pick up the flow of the offense, having played really through October versus not having played at all in the season, or in the case of Greathouse, may not even be a starter when he's back. But I agree, it's help on the offensive line for sure. So then out of the two guys, Tay Johnson and Gabe Rubio, I think this is the tougher question. Who do you expect will have a bigger impact? I think they'll both be back. Who's going to have a bigger impact in the college football playoff?
Normally I would have said Tay Johnson, just because he has really emerged as a star in the secondary. But then, like, granted, it was against Syracuse, but Jalen Stroman had an incredible game this past week, showing that maybe we have a bit more depth at that position than we thought. I think my gut is still telling me Tay Johnson. I think Tay Johnson is someone who I believe could be the next great safety at Notre Dame. So because of that, I feel like I have to lean into that. But look, I would say this is not an easy choice. Gabe Rubio is, I think, he's our best player on the interior defensive line, someone who's extremely disruptive in both the pass rush and also, the run defense too. So, look, someone who's also, I think, likely to make a pretty big impact as well. So not an easy choice. I'm definitely splitting hairs. Both of these guys should be very impactful once they're back and healthy. But my gut is telling me Tay Johnson, just because I think he has just very high end upside. The type that we tend to see from that safety room that's been churning out, just star player after star player.
I agree with the Tay Johnson answer, and I agree because even if Jalen Stroman is there, reminder, Jalen Stroman kind of lost his job, which is all the more impressive that he stuck with it. Grad transfer, like, easy to just kind of get down on yourself, like, not the way he's looking for his career to go out. So I love the Jalen Stroman story, but Gabe Rubio is supported in that interior of the defensive line by Heinisch, Dawson, Hughes, Onye. Like that's a deep group there. It was looking a little thinner when Donovan Heinisch was banged up, but he's back and playing at a high level. So I think we can get away with Gabe Rubio being a rotation piece. I think Tay Johnson's playmaking ability, I'm right there with you. All right, let's dive into the college football rankings. We thought Notre Dame was going to be ranked behind Alabama, or at least thought there was a chance of it. Notre Dame comes in at number 9, 1 spot ahead of Alabama. Mike, first question. Were you surprised we were ahead of Alabama?
I think yes, just because I've been so conditioned over the last, call it 15, 16 years, really since Nick Saban took over the Alabama program, to lose these types of these head-to-head debates, right? Like, generally in the past, Bama has been the recipient of the eye test, whether that's the advanced data or even just kind of getting the benefit of the doubt from the committee, or the media watching your games. So for us to have that edge over Alabama, that's just like something I'm not really accustomed to. I think I saw the advanced data and we stack up very well in it, above Alabama and most models that I've seen. But still, I think there was a sense of skepticism that's just kind of hardwired into me. So I think I was surprised from that sense. And I also just tended to think that, maybe they would lean into Alabama's good wins. Like, we have very good losses, the types of losses that are, they were essentially coin flips against really good teams. Whereas Alabama has really good wins, but then some bad losses. I tended to think that the committee would weight the better wins more. That was at least kind of the line of thinking that I tend to think that they go with, and they actually didn't do that here. So yes, I was surprised for all these reasons, but look, a very pleasant surprise nonetheless. And I mean, look, it just tells you how how dominant we've been playing. We've just been on both sides of the ball, just extremely efficient, very productive, and that's what the advanced stats say. And Brett, is as you've said many times, that is effectively what the eye test is. These predictive models that tell you who the best team actually is. We've been excelling in that, and then in the actual like qualitative eye test of just watching the team, it's pretty clear that in this back half of the season, especially, that we just have been making our opponents look like they don't even belong on the same field with us on a play-by-play basis. So it's good that the committee seems to be, taking all of that into account.
I agree that I was surprised when they have 3 top 20 wins against Georgia, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee to Notre Dame's 1. And yes, that FSU loss looks terrible back in week 1, but their only other loss is to a top 10 opponent by 2 points. And you just stack those up like that's a quality loss and 3 really, really good wins versus Notre Dame just has now 1 top 25 win against the USC team that frankly is going the wrong direction after losing to Oregon. We might be back in a situation if USC happens to lose in an upset to UCLA this week, if Pitt loses to Miami, if Navy doesn't pull a rabbit out of the hat down the stretch, like we might have no top 25 wins. And I think that's going to draw a lot of scrutiny. So I remain surprised by that. Now, should Notre Dame fans be thinking we are out of the woods? Not so fast, to quote our friend Lee Corso. I think we are still a ways out from feeling like this is a guarantee. We've got the scenarios pulled up here. We have a 97% chance to make the college football playoff according to The Athletic, 73% chance according to ESPN. And we've been saying all along, we're somewhere in the middle here on Gyrish Talk. And here's the scenario. There are 7 teams for sure. Really, I'm going to now say 10 teams for sure ahead of us if they win out. It's Indiana, Ohio State, A&M, Georgia, Texas Tech, the ACC champ, and the top-ranked Group of 5 champ, Ole Miss, Oregon, Oklahoma. Those are 8 teams ranked ahead of us and 2 auto bids. So that leaves 2 at-large bids. And you have Alabama right behind us. If they beat Auburn, they're in the SEC championship game, most likely against Texas A&M, potentially against Georgia or Ole Miss. I think if Alabama gets to the SEC championship game and wins in a 50-50 coin flip, they will jump us by way of winning the SEC championship game. And I would be surprised if in that game the loser, A&M, Georgia, or Ole Miss, picks up a second loss and would drop behind Notre Dame with an identical record, knowing the committee doesn't like punishing losses in conference championship games. They might drop a spot or 2. I don't think they're falling behind Notre Dame. Michigan, most unlikely one on this page. You can see they only have a 7% and 3% chance here of making the college football playoff. They would need to beat Ohio State, and I'm not sure if that would also put them I'm not as familiar with the Big Ten championship games, if that would put them in the championship game or not. I don't think it would. It probably would, because their other loss was Oklahoma, right? They'd have 1 Big Ten loss. I think that put them in the Big Ten championship game, would still need to go and beat an Indiana or an Oregon. So the chance that they fully win out here with 2 top 10 wins in a row, very unlikely. But if they do, you could see a scenario where a 2-loss Michigan team who's winning a Big Ten title is going to get in over Notre Dame, or maybe even if they're not in the Big Ten title game, depending on tiebreaker scenarios, does that win over Ohio State push them back into the conversation? Again, this is the one that is least likely, but to me is in play. And then lastly, BYU. Almost certainly big, heavy favorite against UCF. Almost certainly they're going to get a rematch against Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game. If they are able to beat an undefeated Texas Tech, I think Texas Tech stays above Notre Dame. And I think BYU then, as the Big 12 champ, is going to jump Notre Dame as well. And so in those scenarios, that is 3 teams for the last 2 spots. And Notre Dame would actually be the 14th team trying to get in. So of these tier 3 teams, we need Bama, Michigan, BYU. We need two of those teams to lose or an upset from Ole Miss, Oregon, and Oklahoma. Out of that tier 2 and tier 3 group, we need two more losses here over the final weeks of the regular season. That is expected. It is why we are, heavily favored to get in, 73% according to ESPN, 97% according to The Athletic, but we are not out of the woods yet. And I should remind ourselves, in those scenarios, there are still resume conversations to be had. Would we be better or worse than now, like a 2-loss SEC champion or a 1-loss Big 12 champion? Like, there are still scenarios where, resume wise, we could get in, but I think it would start looking pretty tricky for Notre Dame to hold their spot. And so, Mike, I'm curious, as I walk through those scenarios, what stands out to you the most in terms of where you've got, Notre Dame trending here as we wrap up the season and really don't have a chance for another statement win?
We don't have a chance for a statement win. I think it's the way you laid it out. There is a reasonable scenario where Notre Dame could get left out. But look, this is not probable. This is definitely not probable. This is effectively the equivalent of hitting a pretty big parlay, honestly, right? It's like you could see this happening, but it's unlikely that all of these things. It's unlikely that that we have Alabama win the SEC championship. We have BYU win the Big 12 championship, and then there's no chaos in front of us. None of the teams that are ahead of us drop and concede a spot to us. It's possible, but not likely. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. We're also talking about where the Athletic model has us versus ESPN. Athletic basically says if we went out, they basically say it's a certainty that we're in. ESPN is, I think, maybe thinking about it more how we are a bit here, where we're laying out the scenario and we're like, oh, actually, wait a minute, this isn't too crazy. Not likely, but not crazy. I think 73% that they're saying, that seems a little low. We were talking about this before. Probably somewhere in the middle makes more sense. Maybe like 85%. I think a couple other things that stand out to me. The scenario where we get a home playoff game, we basically need one of those tier 2 teams to lose, and they're all going to be favorites. Oklahoma against LSU, Oregon versus Washington, Ole Miss versus Mississippi State. That actually might be an interesting one to watch with all the smoke happening with Lane Kiffin right now. You never know how a team's going to respond to that. And to be fair, we have no idea if Lane Kiffin is actually staying or not. It's possible that he's told the team that he is staying, and they're going to be super fired up for this game. Who knows? But it is a big rivalry game, and there's a lot going on, so that's certainly one to monitor. I still think it's more likely that we get a home playoff game than we have this scenario where we get kicked out. But still, it's definitely worth monitoring. I think if we had this is where you look back to our first two games, right? Two very winnable games. Like that A&M game in particular is one that we should have had. If we had just let the training wheels off of Carr a little bit earlier, or we had maybe called the defense a little bit differently and won one of those games, we wouldn't even be stressed about this right now. We would be talking about whether or not we're getting a bye or a home playoff game. So while we have certainly progressed from those first two games, it is kind of a reminder that we're not totally out of the woods. And if we had been a little bit cleaner from the beginning of the season, we could be watching these, the conference championship weekend and this next weekend here stress-free. I think one other thing I want to call out is Miami. So unless you've been living under a rock in the college football world, this has been a really hot topic of conversation for various people in the media, people on Twitter, and people are just basically up in arms. And I think it's probably overstated. I think it's probably overstated how up in arms, a lot of people are, but there certainly are a lot of people who are upset that Notre Dame is ranked above Miami. We've talked about this. We think, and we're obviously biased, but we think Notre Dame is appropriately ranked. We think that the committee has made it clear that they view these teams as in different tiers. And I think that is the key element here, is they're in different tiers. And when teams are in different tiers, something like a head-to-head, it's not being weighted as heavily as it would otherwise. When teams are within a spot or two of each other and are viewed as comparable, that's when that head-to-head matters a lot more. So for right now, the committee views us as a better team than Miami, and there's really no question in their mind at this point in time. Now, if that changes, that's where it could get interesting. And Brett and I have had a little bit of back and forth on this about like if there is a scenario where Miami could get close enough to where they view them as comparable. And I was just looking at the rankings, and unfortunately, that margin between us and them has shrunk in recent weeks. Miami's played well in recent weeks. Right now, we have, and we'll see what the rankings are tomorrow. We're recording this on a Monday. But right now, Bama, BYU, and Utah are between us, and so Utah held on and won last week, which I think is good for us in this scenario because that's just they maintain that cushion, right? They maintain that cushion between us and Miami. But the scenario where Alabama wins the conference championship and jumps us, then that margin shrinks even more. I think BYU here. Look, I think they're either jumping us, if they were hypothetically to win the Big 12 and jump us, then that margin gets pretty narrow. So the question is, okay, when you have that, when there's only a couple spots between us and Miami, does the committee start to look at us as more comparable now? Do they start looking at that head to head more? And that's the question that's out there. And I don't have an answer for it. But it's also possible that even if there are two spots, they could still view us in a different tier. It's just, I think as that cushion gets narrow, it just makes me a little bit more anxious. One other thing I'm going to call out with Miami, technically they could still make the ACC championship game. Very unlikely. If they did win the ACC championship, though, it actually doesn't really matter because basically what that means is they are just getting the ACC's auto bid. And so that doesn't really have any bearing on us in terms of our probability of actually making the playoff. Like, maybe they would jump us and our seed is one lower, but it actually doesn't impact us. But, I think from my standpoint, it seems like there's a scenario here where Miami could get one or two spots within us. And then personally, I'm anxious that the committee could flip us because of that head to head. But, and then look, another element here is just, there's so much talk about this. There's so many people in the media that are just like kind of pounding the table that Miami should be ranked higher than us head to head. And I like to think that the committee should be immune from this talk. They should keep it out, but look, they're human. So it is hard to gauge how influenced they are by these factors. So look, it's from my perspective, something to monitor, but I think you feel more confident that there's no point in even spending any time stressing about this because it's effectively decided already.
I do. I have the perspective that the committee has spoken on this. The committee has said, look, you have one quality win over Notre Dame. Notre Dame has one quality win over USC. You have two bad later season losses against teams of lower quality. Notre Dame has two early season wins over teams of better quality. And Notre Dame is winning the eye test, and you can see that in the advanced analytics. We're higher in SP+, we're higher in FPI. And right now, I don't see a scenario where Miami, needs a prayer to get into the ACC championship game. I just don't think there's enough data points left on the field. And frankly, I think what would happen is Miami needs to win the ACC championship game, which again, a bunch of teams need to lose. And then Miami can go take the auto bid that we're already kind of factoring in being there in the ACC champ, whoever at this point kind of stumbles into it, like at UVA. So I still maintain that's a long shot. And I just think the committee said no, that they're in different groups, they're in different tiers. I get more nervous about the Alabama BYU scenario if both of those two teams win their conference championship games and everyone else in that tier 2 group, Ole Miss, Oregon, Oklahoma, if they all hold serve. That's the scenario I get nervous about way before I start thinking about are we, 1A, 1B versus Miami. With that as a final thought on the CFP, I think this won't be the most meaningful rankings to come out. I think this is going to look pretty much like last week. Not a lot of chaos in college football. Again, we are big Mississippi State, Washington, and LSU fans this weekend. We are also big Notre Dame fans. Let's close out the show looking at this Stanford team. And Mike, it is continued to be a tough road out in Palo Alto, coaching the entire year with an interim coach. Andrew Luck has taken over as the, I believe, general manager, head of football operations. And brings in Frank Reich as interim, one of his coaches in his time in Indianapolis in the NFL. And my one word for this team, spunky. Like they're 4-7, despite being the 114th best team in college football according to SP Plus. They are winning some games they're not supposed to. Now they are not winning those games when they're 32.5 point underdogs. But I credit this Stanford team for being spunky. They're not making a bowl game. This will be their Super Bowl. This will most likely be their last game with their interim coach. I've been pretty impressed with how competitive this team has played, albeit I don't think against teams of Notre Dame's caliber. Mike, I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts before we dive into the offense and the defense?
Given where they stack up in the advanced stats, I wouldn't say I'm nervous, but I feel like it might understate like the possibility of them being able to be competitive for maybe longer than we would expect. They had a big win last week against Cal, the rival. There's a lot of data out there that shows that they are substantially better at home. Everybody's better at home, but I think that's particularly true for the Stanford team. Marcus Freeman even called that out in his press conference today. And then, look,
Just on that, by the way, this is stark. They are winless on the road. They are 0-6 on the road. They are 4-1 at home. And 3 of those games, they were an underdog, including 2 games when they were a multi-score underdog. So, like, that's very night and day. Like, they get blown out on the road. They play tough at home, and including pulling off 3 upsets so far this year.
If you want to get real spooky, I want to say one of the largest upsets in college football ever was a lackluster Stanford team knocked off a Pete Carroll USC team at the peak of their powers. I want to say they were, I don't know, 28-point underdogs or something like that. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that is an example that's brought up occasionally in terms of some of the largest upsets in college football history. So obviously,
or go back to the 2022 game where Notre Dame was, I believe, a 2 or 3 touchdown favorite, and we lost 16-14 in Marcus Freeman's first year. Of course, that was also the year of Marshall, among others. So I know we're going back a few years, and I hope we're past that. But
yeah,
I'm using the word spunky to, I think, try to drum up a narrative that I don't think is there as 32.5 point favorites. But
yeah,
this Stanford team, they are down, but I think they are competitive. I don't think they've given up on this season, and they're fighting in every game, and they should, they should get credit and attention for that.
I was trying not to get too spooky, Brett. I didn't want to mention the 2022. I was trying to keep it to USC, but no, it's a great call out. And look, yeah, I think spunky is the right word. It's basically they kind of have the vibe of a program where if next year they pulled together a 7 or 8 win season and look dramatically improved, that wouldn't be stunning to me. I would say, oh, you know what, we saw signs of their program improving last year, even though they were very lackluster. So, but I mean, I guess like diving in more on those advanced stats, that they do fare very poorly. They're 114. That's abysmal. That's right around where Syracuse was. I think it might even be worse than Syracuse, honestly. Offense 117, so really a struggle on offense, and then 92 on defense, which is obviously not getting it done there. They're more on their offense. They switched quarterbacks. The original starter, more interceptions than touchdowns. The new guy went 10 for 20 for 123 yards in a win, which I guess, maybe that's a bit of improvement, but he took 9 sacks in a loss at UNC. Run game, as you'd expect with an offense that is ranked as poorly as them, is not going to be stellar. It's meh at best. 4.3 yards a carry from the running backs. But so look, not a whole lot to fear from their offense, and the Notre Dame defense has been absolutely rolling. And look, we might have Tay Johnson back this game. We'll see. So I would be very surprised if they're able to do a whole lot against us, and from their offense. And then moving to the defense, maybe it's improving a bit. 2 straight opponents under 20 points, 4 turnovers versus Pitt. But then they also had 3 turnovers for short field scores. So look, generally they slowed down the Panthers though. I think the key thing with their defense though is that still their pass defense is capital B bad. Just they don't really generate much disruption. They're not generating turnovers. They get some sacks, but not that, not not a crazy amount. They have about 2 sacks per game, 23, for the year. In terms of pass yards, 285 per game. That's one of the worst marks in the country. So, look, I think this is a defense that CJ Carr. This is a game where we should see CJ Carr, light them up. And look, hopefully Jeremiah Love is able to add another impressive stat line to help his Heisman campaign. I think circling back to some of the spunky stuff though, there's one other call out I want to make. This game is starting at I think it's 10:30 p.m. Eastern time. Yeah, so just a very odd start time. Obviously, Notre Dame had no say in that. So look, I think Freeman's doing everything he can to make sure that the team will be ready to go at that time. But this is a team that's based in the Eastern time zone, and then and then if you're going across the country, 3-hour time zone difference, there is jet lag for sure. I think it's easier to go to the West Coast, but I think when it's late, I think that kind of changes the math a little bit, because now, it's you're at halftime and it feels like it's midnight, right? So look, it's like if we're looking a little sluggish as the game wears on, that's something to keep tabs on. But look, this team, as I kind of briefly went through, don't really have, they haven't really been able to put together many, impressive performances. They've overperformed, very low expectations, and they've been trending the right way. But still, this is a team that I don't think they have the horsepower to stack up against Notre Dame. And look, that's reflected in the point spread. This is another over 30 point spread. I think we wrote it down. Was it like 32 and a half points? Syracuse was 36 and a half, I think, at the time of the game start. So this is a matchup where Notre Dame is expected to overwhelm Stanford.
So I've got two stray thoughts that all make sense, and I hope to spend as little time thinking about this game similar to the Syracuse game. They are you mentioned it, they give up 285 yards in the passing game. I was looking that up. It's third worst in the country. The only two teams that are worse are NC State and Boston College. Now, interestingly, Boston College kind of held Notre Dame's pass game in check. I'm not going to compare those two. What I do want to call it is the 5 worst pass defenses are all in the ACC in terms of passing yards per game. Like, is the ACC the new Big 12? Like, what is going on where they're just like half of the ACC is just the worst in college football at pass defense? I thought that was an interesting stat. The other is that in terms of the talent composite, Stanford all the way down to 46. A program that was consistently recruiting top 20, top 25 classes for a long period of time, just 11 4-stars on their roster compared to Notre Dame with 58 4 and 5 stars. I continue to just believe talent will win the day. I don't think that the Stanford Cardinal has the talent to match up. And so with that 32 and a half point spread, ESPN says we should win this one 96% of the time. And SP Plus is just about right on top of the spread at a 31 and a half point prediction. I don't know. I'll just say 42-7. I'm totally guessing. I wouldn't bet on this game. I never like betting on games with really big point spreads, but I think Notre Dame's going to show up. We know the eye test is important. We know we need statement win after statement win. We know we're trying to get Jeremiah Love to New York for the Heisman Trophy. So I've got Notre Dame big in another dominating win to close out the season. But do we win by 30 points or 40 points? I don't know. But it should be a blowout, and there's just no reason this one should be close.
I'm similar, Brett. I'm going to pick Notre Dame to cover here, 45-10. These big spreads are always tough to predict, but we still have a lot at stake. I mean, obviously, style points matter a lot here. We want to put an exclamation mark on our resume heading into this, and to the extent that we can improve on the eye test, improve in the advanced stats, this is another opportunity to do that, even if it is against a lackluster opponent. Shout out also to Pete Sampson last week from The Athletic. I think his score prediction for the Syracuse game was 55-0 or something like that. And when I saw that, I laughed. And then, I mean, honestly, I was like, wow, well done, Pete. You actually kind of understated it. So I wasn't going to be that aggressive. I'm not going to pick a 50-0 margin here. But look, I think there is the possibility here that this could look a little bit like the Syracuse game. Like I think this Notre Dame team is, again, it's not the marquee matchup of the weekend, but I think this Notre Dame team is. I think we're getting a little angry. I think these guys are on the team are hearing all the chatter, that like, hey, why the heck is Notre Dame like ranked in the college football playoff? But yeah, I don't think that they could beat any of these top teams, even though the eye test and the advanced stats would say otherwise. I think they are very aware of this. And I think, and I've said this in recent weeks as well, I think they have a chip on their shoulder. And look, I think, unfortunately, the Stanford Cardinal is going to be at the other end of some of that anger this weekend.
Absolutely. Well, we will be back to recap the show, look ahead to the college football playoff after this one. Until then, to all of our listeners and your family, happy Thanksgiving. Be safe, rest up. Hope it's great time with your family. And please, please, please share the podcast at the Thanksgiving table. No one needs to talk about religion. No one needs to talk about politics. If, Uncle Jerry starts getting a little loose lip, just send him off into a corner and be like, dude, you got to listen to this podcast. Go get us a couple more listeners. Let's bring home a victory. Close this thing out 10-2. Gyrish beat Cardinal.
Gyrish beat Cardinal.